Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zac Reed. I am joined again by JMIc and Matt Foreman, and we are back again to re-rack some rookies. It is the 2023 Dynasty Dummies Rookie Hootenanny quarterback and tight end edition. We're going SuperFlex. We're going tight end premium, and going down through 5 of each for you. And remember, the next 2 weeks are the catch-all shows, the wide receivers, the running backs. If you want us to do quarterbacks and tight ends, that's fine. We need to know, so we'll get there. But this week, tight ends, quarterbacks. Matt, JMIc, how's it going?
We are doing well. The weather is beautiful here again, so I've got the window open.
It's finally up to 45 degrees here, so we're digging it.
I'm going to need you to pass some of that weather down here because we've got about 2 to 6 inches of rain we're supposed to be getting from the storm. So good times. But grateful to be here again. Celebrating, I think, is the best way to put it. Celebrating the Dynasty Dummies Rookie Hootenanny. We enjoy this very much. We enjoy the fun. We enjoy the laughs. And we're grateful to be able to come to you. So again, for the folks who have been rocking with us for a very long time, thank you. For the folks who have been rocking with us, maybe today's your first show. Thank you. And anywhere in between, we're grateful. And we just appreciate the fact that you take time to be able to hear us out and make us, on purpose or inadvertently, a part of your process throughout this Dynasty season and rookie evaluation season. So again, what we do here is be able to tell you what we see on film, jump into a lot of the fun and tell you at least how we see this translating toward fantasy football production, because that's the name of the game here at the Dynasty Dummies. Fellas, today it's quarterbacks, it's tight ends, it's a total of 10 players. So a little bit more quick hitting than we're typically used to over these last few weeks, where we really dive a little bit deeper. And I'm super excited because this always means this is the eve of the catch-all, where we get to do a lot more diving and see some players that maybe we haven't put eyes on. But you can't look over quarterbacks. You can't look over tight ends. So the onesie positions and or the super flex positions, where things are incredibly important, where points are scored, where advantages are created, and where we can be excited and be very wrong in some instances about some of the things that we see. So fellas, before we get into it, is there anything else that's on your mind that you really want to make sure that we address before jumping in to quarterbacks?
Yeah, I love that, JMIc. The top of the top at these onesie positions, the quarterback and tight end, matter so much. And if you can get one of those players, the George Kittle, the Mark Andrews, the Pat Mahomes, that type of player in a rookie draft, the Josh Allen who fell, then all of a sudden you are making some noise in your dynasty leagues. But I think it's important to remember, first, quarterback evaluation is kind of like playing darts blindfolded in a hurricane. Like it is not an exact science. You're doing a lot of hoping. I think that it's important. Accuracy is nice. Rushing ability is gold, but really it comes down to draft capital. It comes down to where these guys end up. It comes down to, Peter Howard just had a great tweet today, and it was something to the effect of 60% of the fantasy relevant quarterbacks are drafted in the top 12 picks in the NFL draft. And so that's just something to keep in mind when we do that. And tight ends are the only position, and I use that just a little tongue in cheek, the only position beholden to the combine, because athleticism matters at that position more than it does at any other position. In fact, and this is a tweet from Charles Chill FFB, which is Scott Connor, and he tweeted out 95% of the top 12 tight ends in the last 11 years have posted a relative athletic score. That's the RAS score from Kent Lee Platt, who's at MathBomb, over 6.0. So 95% of tight ends over a 6.0. You got to have that athleticism for tight end. So those are the kind of benchmarks that we're looking for here. But again, not an exact science. We're coming at you doing the best we can with what we see.
Very well put. Foreman, anything else before we dive in?
No, I think something just, again, I think we kind of talk about this every year with these tight ends, is just Some of these guys are just, you might have to wait and see. You're going to have to take your lumps year one and just kind of trust your process. Or if that's the way you want to be, then just don't draft any tight ends and just get them for 80 cents on the dollar after year one. So the tight ends are the kind of these guys, unless you have, we were talking about it last night on the FF Dynasty, like what tight ends have really improved their draft stock after year one. And the only person I could think of really was Pat Freiermuth. But other than that, a lot of these guys they're just like they fall off, or you know what I mean, or you have these guys who went in the third, fourth round, like okay, maybe they're a little bit more valuable, but you're still not paying anything for them. So like you have like your Bellingers of the world, or your the guy out in Denver, his name is escaping me. Dulcich, yes, those guys were. I mean, their value might be a little bit higher than what it was, but it's still meaningless. A Conquo, you know what I mean? Like these guys who you were getting in their fourth and fifth rounds, even in tight end premium leagues, but they're worth a little bit more. But like at the end of the day, they're still not worth anything because they're being drafted as tight end 16. So it's just like at that point, there's not really a difference. So tight end to these guys that you're going to have to maybe sit and wait on for a year, maybe two. So don't get overzealous with these tight ends if they're not producing like you want year one.
That's a fact. Put them in the slow cooker. Put them in that crock pot. Just let it stew. Let it stew. Let it stew. It'll take some time, but you hope at the end of it, you come out with something delicious. All right, that analogy is going a little left, so let me just keep it moving here. Let's just go to quarterbacks. We'll just forget tight ends altogether for a moment. We're going to start with quarterbacks, and we're going to go all the way down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Probably, I would go out to say, their most talented quarterback in quite some time, maybe ever. I don't know about the old school. I don't know. Bryce Young measures in at the combine, 5'10", 204 pounds. Liar. 204 pounds, my butt. But no, 5'10", 204. And really the highlight came from his sophomore season when he was the first-time starter there. 547 attempts, 4,872 yards, and 47 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, which is just absurd. We look at what happened this past season in 2022. We know the offense was not quite the same. The offensive weapons weren't the same, even though they did get Jahmyr Gibbs, which was a nice little upgrade there. But the wide receivers and the pass catchers were just not up to snuff for what they typically have at Alabama. That was 380 attempts, 3,328 yards, and we're looking at 32 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Now, just for a moment, I want to throw this out to everyone. These are the awards that one Bryce Young garnered from his 2021 season. me. AP Player of the Year, Consensus All-American, the Davey O'Brien Award, Best Quarterback, Heisman Trophy, Manning Award, the Maxwell Award, and the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. All of that in the year of 2021. Bryce Young, for my money, is nope, I'm not even going to say it. I'm just going to tell you right now, big fan. Zach, we'll give you honors here. Bryce Young, let's get to it.
It sounds pretty good to me, JMIc. After spending the last 2 years talking him up, the entire football community has decided to bury Bryce Young, which I think is unfortunate since he's only 5'10" and he's not tall enough to see out of a grave. If only we had some way that we could know that he could handle playing in the NFL. Like maybe if Young had played in a conference that 1/3 of the entire player pool comes from, or if he did something like throw for almost 5,000 yards and 47 touchdowns as a sophomore. If only. For my money, Bryce Young has been used to playing with a clean pocket over the last few years at Alabama. And when he gets time to survey things, Young's patience and deep accuracy is exceptional. He also puts the ball on his receivers in stride, and that makes it so they can not only make a catch, but also add additional yards onto the play. Probably the most impressive aspect of Young's game, though, is his ability to run through pre-snap identifications and the way he runs through progressions once he has the ball. He doesn't hesitate to check down or to use his mobility to move the pocket. And as a last resort, he'll run to pick up yardage.
All right. That's pretty good stuff there, I'd say. Foreman, over to you.
All right, so Bryce Young, I'm gonna agree with a lot of things Zach said here. Got a great short, compact motion, uses his legs to move the pocket, and continues to look downfield. Even though he does, he's able to get those couple extra yards when things do break down. He does have that nice deep ball accuracy. The nice deep ball accuracy. Again, I think we saw things move. I wouldn't say back for him, but obviously he didn't have his eye-popping stats in 2021 without James Williams and to a much lesser extent John Mechie. But not trying to throw shade at John Mechie or anything. But yeah, I think the community as a whole has kind of been down on Young as well too. I think part of it could be warranted. I think part of it's a bit just people. It's just that what do we talk about every year? Like people just get tired of talking about these people, and they just nitpick the hell out of them, and then this is what we ended up with. So I don't see a way that Bryce Young gets picked after the second pick. So I'd be surprised, but that's just me.
Yeah, and one of the really unique things I think about Bryce Young's situation, and obviously also to mention, he did get injured this season. That was a case where at the tail end of the year, we didn't see him at his absolute best. After that injury, I know they had the issue where I think we missed one of the games, missed part of another game, and it was kind of a mess there. And the entire Alabama program, I feel like, should just be ashamed that they did not win a national championship with Bryce Young at quarterback, which is just one of the crazier things I feel like that's happened in college football that I don't know how many people talk about that or notice that. But anywho, when we talk about the drawbacks, obviously the guy measures in at 5'10". We've been hoping that he was at least 6 feet, and unfortunately that's not the case. Foreman, let's talk a little bit about things you don't love about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure he has the upside. I think we have he's allowed to do things well, but I'm just not sure. I think Young is a solid double. I'm not sure he's the home run that some of these other players we're going to talk about are, but I think he provides that floor that a lot of these other guys don't. And if he was 2 inches taller, I don't think we'd be worrying about any of this. So I was one thing I want to say, I would be surprised that I didn't see, for him being only 5'10", I wasn't seeing him get a lot of balls batted down. That's something you worry about with these shorter quarterbacks, and that's not something you saw a whole lot. But I think the biggest thing is just how Young is his size. That's the whole thing with me, is just his size. Again, like I said, if he was 2 inches taller, I think he would be the consensus 101.
Zach, what do you not like about the game of Bryce Young?
So for me, when things break down on the interior of the offensive line, things break down for Bryce Young. When there are defenders in his face, especially from the middle, Young has a tendency to drop his back foot, which in turn drops his shoulder, resulting in high throws. Not only does his form break down when pressured, but I think his decision-making is proportional to the amount of space he has around him. And also Young's throwing motion starts kind of low. I know, Matt, you said it's compact. I think it starts way down, but it's so quick that his release allows him to get away with it, with the caveat that when he drops down to a sidearm delivery, usually under pressure, when that happens, Young's throws are easy to deflect for defenders and often too errant for his wide receivers. I've got a little note that says, lose that, you are not Pat Mahomes. Like, let's just file that away for some other time. I think Bryce Young has been an exceptional quarterback for his last 2 seasons in the SEC. He has been easily identifiable as a pro-level prospect. He's been under 6 feet the entire time. The short of it is, your evaluation of Bryce Young should not change because he lost 1 3/4 inches at the combine. I still think he's that guy.
He's that guy. That's just where I'm at. And one of the really unique things before we move on to our next player, I'm going to slide this in quickly. I am fascinated in advance for how people will navigate these early picks in their rookie drafts. We believe that the quarterbacks are going to get the capital. We believe that obviously Bijan's going to probably go in the first round. We believe JSN, Gibbs, Addison. We believe all these guys will be relatively where we believe they'll be slotted in terms of general draft capital. But how people navigate, okay, are we leaning into the 5'10"? He's been incredible. And even with super human athleticism, as Todd Radmaker says in reference to Anthony Richardson, just how all of us navigate the first picks of the rounds will be just fascinating. And I am so looking forward to it because I think it's going to be fun just to be able to see how it works out from league to league. Transitioning to the next quarterback here, a man who's finished in the top 4 in Heisman voting 2 years in a row. 4th in 2021, 3rd in 22, number 2 on the program, number 1 in your hearts, C.J. Stroud. I'm sorry, number 7 in the program. Regardless, from Ohio State, measures in at 6'3", 214 pounds, and by many accounts had one of the best showings at the combine of the quarterbacks who were throwing. Again, 85 touchdowns over the last couple of years, over 8,000 yards passing, and really what's interesting about that is in 2 seasons where he's throwing the ball over 830 times, only 12 interceptions. CJ Stroud was the do-it-all everything and one few yards short of taking them to probably a national championship win against TCU perhaps this past season. Stroud was incredible. And again, we talk about guys who are as talented as any at the position that's come out of that school. CJ Stroud's been able to throw dots and be incredibly impressive. Foreman, we start with you this time. Let's talk with the Buckeye standout, CJ Stroud.
As much as I don't like giving props to Buckeyes, Stroud's a good. I mean, again, it's just so frustrating every year. So talking about these damn Ohio State quarterbacks, it's just like, when are they going to stop producing these like superhuman quarterbacks? It's just like every 3 years. Oh, here we are talking about an Ohio State quarterback. Great, I get to talk about. It was even worse with Justin Fields because he was committed to Penn State at one point. That's the worst part. Anyways, so again, I think I see a lot of the similar things with Young as I do with Stroud. They both have those nice compact deliveries. I love how Stroud keeps his eyes downfield in the face of pressure. He's got good touch. He's got enough mobility. Unlike his predecessors at Ohio State, he wasn't asked to run a ton. I think he can, but I don't think that's a huge part of what he wants to do. I think he's in a similar vein as these top level quarterbacks we're seeing who can run, but it's definitely not their first instinct. They're not going to be guys who are going to be running for 400 or 500 yards a season. They're going to get you, you know what I mean, maybe 4 to, you know what I mean? They're going to get you those 30, 40 yards and those short little touchdowns every once in a while that help boost them to be those elite quarterbacks. But he's not Anthony Richardson, but I think he has enough mobility there where he does a great job working through progressions. And again, like I just mentioned, he uses legs to extend the plays rather than just taking off when things start to break down behind the line of scrimmage.
Very well. Cole Bernard Stroud IV, I believe, as Kane always calls him. Zach, over to you.
There's not much worse than folding laundry, except for maybe scouting laundry. And I think too many people see that scarlet and gray of Ohio State, and they immediately dismiss CJ Stroud as another product of the system that produced Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields, that they both thrived in that system. And after watching Stroud support potentially 5 NFL caliber receivers in his 2 years in Columbus, I think it's obvious that he is a top tier NFL prospect as well. Wide receiver used pass catchers aren't throwing to themselves. CJ Stroud is impressive in the pocket, stepping up through pressure to extend plays and to allow his receivers more time to operate. When he is forced to move up and away from pressure, Stroud has an incredible ability to keep track of things downfield while extricating himself from trouble. Matt, you kind of touched on that. Although Stroud's mobility within the confines of the pocket is a strength, he will run to escape pressure as that last option. He's pretty good about cycling through and knowing when he needs to run, get that first down, keep the chains moving. Stroud is a very accurate passer, but is most adept on short and intermediate throws. He regularly hits his receivers in stride for yards after the catch. You love to see that. And he also makes back shoulder throws to the sideline with consistency. And that's a throw that has really become a staple in NFL offenses.
In stride. We like to see in stride with Stroud. When we think about CJ Stroud, and as we talk a little bit about the things that we may not love about his game, I do think one of the interesting things that we did see in that game against Georgia in the national championship semifinal, it was cool to be able to see him run around a little bit. Georgia would get a little bit of pressure. He was able to show a little bit of excitement and the ability to get away from folks in the pocket. While generally speaking on film, that's not something that he showed a lot of. It was nice to see that flash against top-level defense. I do think that was cool to see. Zach, right back to you. Drawbacks, CJ Stroud, go.
Part of the problem with having so many amazing playmakers at his disposal was that Stroud was often too patient, holding the ball too long while trying to make a play or let his receivers make a play. Stroud does a great job extending plays by moving the pocket, but when he does not reset his platform, he has a tendency to overshoot his intended receiver. You know, it's that whole drop your shoulder, the ball sails. He also, when receivers come open on underneath throws, I think he sometimes tends to aim the ball like a dart rather than fully throw it. And that leads to low throws and incompletions. He's almost getting too fine. Stroud's decision-making when he is in immediate danger is suspect. I think he would be better off throwing the ball away more often than he does. I think sometimes he tries to fit it in places that he shouldn't. Ultimately, CJ Stroud has the size, the mobility, the arm strength, and the accuracy to be a very productive quarterback for both NFL and your fantasy teams. The biggest drawback for fantasy is that nearly all of his production will come via his arm. Luckily, it shouldn't matter much what shirt he's wearing.
There it is, Foreman. Over to you. Any snags you see in this game?
Yeah, I think Zach hit on the two big ones that I was concerned with, which was not resetting his feet and missing on those ones, and then his ability to feel pressure better in the pocket. Those were the two big ones that I was concerned with. But I think those things are things that can be coached up per se. So I think there's a lot of things there that the lumps that we have there, those can be smoothed out a bit. So not something that I'm concerned with. Just again, none of these players are perfect except for Bijan, but
very well. I'll be super brief with this, guys. Quick answers. You don't have to wax on this one. Dak Prescott or CJ Stroud right now?
I think I'd take Stroud. It's close, but I think I'd take Stroud.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna stick with Dak for right now.
Okay.
I think I just prefer Dak at this point, but ask me again in 6 months and I might have a different answer for you.
Fair enough. How about this? I'll ask you again in a month, and we'll go from
yes, there. Even better.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, on to the next one. We're going to a place that I love, the place that I hold near and dear to my heart. You know it as Lexington, Kentucky, horse capital of the world, birthplace of one JMIc Check. I know it as home and the wonderful place that was able to house one Will Levis after he transferred from Matt Foreman's beloved Happy Valley. Yes, I know he couldn't beat out Sean Clifford. I get it, Foreman. I know where you're going with that. He spends 2 years at Penn State, transfers to Kentucky, and really blossoms into now it is an NFL viable prospect that, whether you love him or hate him, and a lot of folks hate him, has been able to put together a lot of production at Kentucky, and obviously shine through. Best season being that 2021 season. We had Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator, and this past season in 2022, what a mess. But in 2021, 353 attempts, 2,800 yards through the air, 24 touchdowns, 13 picks. And obviously he was able to give you some production on the ground as well. But in 2022, he gets hurt. He deals with a myriad of injuries between a shoulder, a foot, a dislocated finger against Ole Miss at the game I actually got to watch in Oxford, which was really gross. 283 attempts on the season, 2,400 yards. Kentucky essentially shut him down at some instances, 19 touchdowns, 10 picks. He didn't take that step forward like many had hoped he would. And quite frankly, in an up and down year, lots of folks have questions, and there are even projections to what Will Levis could be, from the heights of one Josh Allen to the depths of one Jake Locker. Since he started in Happy Valley, I'm going to start with you, Foreman. What would you like to say in reference to Will Levis?
So to defend Will Levis, I do not believe he was used to his full potential in Happy Valley, and that was very obvious once we saw him get transferred down to Lexington. It was evident when we saw those videos that came out of him just throwing the ball in a field house, and we're like, wow, this guy can actually throw the ball. He's not just a fullback. So, again, that's probably also why Penn State's offensive coordinator was fired after 2020 as well, too. So, we've got that as well, too. But on to Levis. I think Levis's biggest skill is his ability to be a quarterback, in the sense that his ability to read the field, his ability to be a field general, I think is something that's going to help project him by NFL standards. Everything that we've heard so far has been about how well he does in the classroom. So he's got a strong arm there, and he's got a nice quick release. And obviously he possesses those running abilities, which we didn't get to see as much in 2022 because of those myriad of injuries that he had that you mentioned. But I think there's a lot of things you like about Levis. I mean, I think a nice projection for him could be a Daniel Jones type player, where maybe he's got to get the right fit. He's got to find his Brian Daboll.
Find your Brian Daboll. That's a wonderful life lesson for all of us. Over to you, Zach. Let's talk with Levis. Oh, you're muted.
You and I have talked a little bit about him, JMIc, and I don't think that the people who are as down on Will Levis understand the full potential, and the people who are really high on Will Levis don't understand the flaws. But to me, it's Josh Allen. And once we've gotten that out of the way, we can actually talk Will Levis, because that's all anybody wants to talk about. And I think it's the lazy link between Levis and surefire stardom. It's that arm strength. Levis has a large caliber right arm and is capable of making nearly any throw he's asked to. The problem is he doesn't always make those throws. He doesn't even need much time to load up, though. Levis seems to be able to simply flip the ball 40 or 50 yards downfield. And I think when Levis has a clean pocket, he does a really good job cycling through a progression and finding the open receiver, which is not something you necessarily expected to find on Will Levis tape if you're listening to kind of the masses talk about Will Levis. And I think he's surprisingly accurate on short throws and screens, as long as he's not asked to move too much.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't want to sit here and be the fan apologist. I could, but I'm not going to do it. I will just say Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong. That's the right law, right? Did I mess that up?
That's good. You're there, Murphy.
Outstanding. Yes. Yes. Shout out to Murphy and his unseemly law.
Have you heard of? Have you, by the way,
heard of what?
Cole's Law.
It's delicious on pulled pork. I know that much. With Will Levis, and again, I don't want to sound like an apologist. I'll just tell you what it was. Obviously, with the injuries, the change in offensive coordinator, the offensive line that was essentially crowned year after year, the big blue wall, was anything but this past season. And as someone who watched every single snap, some of which live for Will Levis, It was a mess. And obviously his own deficiencies did not help him be able to push through that. Zach, I'm going to come right back to you. Let's talk some of the hitches in Levis.
So I think that the big problem with Will Levis is that although he's billed as a dual threat quarterback, his effectiveness as a runner is predicated on his physicality. He does a good job running through contact and gaining positive yards, but I don't think he has the necessary vision required to gain chunk plays. And he runs a little bit like Taysom Hill to me. And I don't want Taysom Hill to be my quarterback. I want Will Levis to be my quarterback, but I don't want him to put himself in situations where he can really get hit in the run game. I also think that even Levis's greatest asset gets him into trouble. Most of his bad decisions under pressure stem from the fact that he's got such a big arm that Levis will just throw the ball up for grabs rather than throw the ball away. It's funny. I don't think I have seen as many completions from a quarterback where he threw the ball through the original receiver and it ended up at a secondary receiver and caught as I did on Will Levis's film. I also think that he struggles with accuracy when moving the pocket, especially when he slides to his right. Like if I were a defensive coordinator, I would be making Will Levis roll to his right as much as I possibly could because he tends to drop that shoulder, leaving the ball sailing high. Levis has, I think, at the very least, a skill set that should make him an NFL starting quarterback for the next few years. That has value in SuperFlex leagues. Unfortunately, I think his overall ceiling feels capped. So I don't believe he's going to end up as a top third finisher. I think he's going to be, Matt, you mentioned Daniel Jones. I feel like that ceiling where he's like right at the cusp of a top 12 quarterback is about where I see Will Levis's ceiling, which is good, but it's not quite what we want out of a first round pick.
He's Jared Goff if he had legs. Yeah. So, Levis, like I said, I think there's some things we don't like about Levis. I think bringing up his physicality as a runner is something that is definitely overlooked. Is he's not? I mean, you don't want your guy you're giving $20 million guaranteed to as a rookie trying to lower his shoulder to try and gain yards. You want him to be a quarterback, not a fullback. So, Levis short arms the ball a bit too much for me as well too. He has some inaccuracy issues, which is giving him the Josh Allen comparisons because of Allen's accuracy issues in college. And I think he's going to need some coaching on some of these mechanical things. Again, that's why I'm telling him he needs to find his day ball because Liam Cohen, who's going back to Kentucky now because of his experiment with the Rams that just did not end up well. But that was a product of the fact that he had a Swiss cheese offensive line. Hey, how you doing? Shout out BBN. But yeah, again, there's some things to like with Levis. I think he's someone that the community as a whole is kind of down on because there's some warts to his game. But I think there's a lot of things to like that NFL teams are going to covet more than the dynasty community is because they can see the things, again, like I mentioned, of him being able to process the field and work through his progressions that we don't see from a standpoint a lot of times unless you're going through and actually watching him be a quarterback.
Yeah, and I would just caution anyone who's listening to us right now, if you hear analysis on Will Levis's game and people just tell you about how bad he sucks, I'm just going to encourage you to do more digging and understand that there's a lot of context to be said about his season, specifically this past year. And I'll leave it there. On, you okay? Moving on. Anthony Richardson is up next, and you talk about the Konami Code darling of all Konami Code darlings. Anthony Richardson comes to the combine 6'4", 244 out of Gainesville, Florida. Yes, Florida Gators. And listen, down the swamp, this might have been his only season as he was seemingly by many thought he was held back and not playing last year when he should have been as a freshman. But here he was this past season, 327 attempts, 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 picks, and probably by far the least amount of games started of these group of players that we're looking at the quarterback position today. However, when you come out to the combine and put on the show that he did this past year, when you flash the brilliance and moments that we saw throughout the year at different times, you will have a lot of NFL GMs and fantasy football dynasty players alike salivating over what could be with a guy like Anthony Richardson. Zack Reed, the floor is yours.
Fantasy football is not reality. It's a pale imitation that puts nerds in a position of power and jocks close enough to the action to relive some of those glory days, but it's not reality. And most importantly, what is valuable in fantasy football is not necessarily valued the same by the NFL. Anthony Richardson may not be reality either. It should not be physically possible to run 40 yards in 4.43 seconds for someone who is 6'4" and 244 pounds, but it's not impossible for Anthony Richardson. His athleticism is ridiculous, but even so, Richardson doesn't use his legs as his primary read. He will go through progressions reasonably well when he has a clean pocket and run only when he's exhausted his options. I do think Richardson does a good job climbing the pocket, stepping into throws, or running out of trouble once he does that, using his size and speed. And he has the arm strength to make throws deep downfield, keeping defenses from condensing things to stop his run.
Man, can we keep the love fest going with your Foreman? What do you got on Richardson?
So yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of the things Zach's seen here as well too. With Richardson, again, you just salivate over this guy's arm strength. A lot of these guys these mobile quarterbacks you're seeing, you're not seeing this arm strength you're getting with Richardson. And again, the same thing saw with Zach as well too. Something I really wasn't expecting to see with Richardson was I was expecting a guy who saw the slightest bit of pressure and he was going to be off. And that's not what his game was at all. He sat there. He can do it, but again, that's not his first instinct is to run. And he just looks so effortless throwing the ball. He just it looks like he just does a little flick and it's just 40 yards downfield. And it's incredible watching him play the game. And again, then we just take a look at his rushing ability. And he's electric. Like, man, it's just, we see what Justin Fields did this past year. And you're just like, man, if we can get Justin Fields with better arm strength, watch out.
Anthony Richardson poses so much in the way of upside, and to some degree, you wonder, is the upside gonna blind people, or is it a case where, hey, if you think about it, we want the upside because if you take a big hack at it, you might pull an Adam Dunn and hit 500-foot bombs, or it could be a case where you take an Adam Dunn hack at it and you strike out. It can go either way. Foreman, coming right back to you. Let's talk a little bit about what you may not enjoy about Anthony Richardson's play.
Shout out the early 2000s Cincinnati Reds.
Talk about it.
Ken Griffey Jr. is the third highest paid Cincinnati Red this year. The third highest paid, Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah, but he's still hitting bombs in BP at the World Baseball Classic. So he's probably worth it.
Still the sweetest swing in
baseball.
That's what
I was just gonna say that. Still, it's so good. It's just so good. Like no one can wear a hat backward quite like Ken Griffey Jr. No one. I don't care. what who is it? Colin Coward's backwards hat. If one person can pull it off, it is Ken Griffey Jr. I don't care if he can't be a leader of men because he wear a hat backwards. But I digress about Ken Griffey Jr. The biggest things with Richardson, the accuracy issues. It's just the accuracy issues. I thought to me that he keyed a bit onto his first read too much. That was something that I saw. I have some concerns about his ability to process the field. I think it's something he can do. I'm not sure if it's something if it's just a him thing or something he was asked to do. Again, we had some weird stuff going on in Florida again this year as well too. And they don't have the pass catchers we're normally seeing with them as well too. Shout out another Penn State bygone, Justin Shorter. So we're just if you want to pull Penn State, I can pull Penn State into anything with this anymore. If there's a will, there's a way with me. But yeah, again, it's my two big concerns are processing the field and accuracy issues, which are not small things we have with Richardson.
All right. In the event that you swing and miss, Zach, what are we looking at?
Yeah, accuracy is Richardson's Achilles heel. He struggles with staying on target when he's on the move, when he's hurrying, or when he's under pressure. He even struggles occasionally when it's under perfect circumstances. And even when he does connect with his receiver, Richardson rarely gives them an opportunity for yards after the catch. He rarely throws the ball away when he's feeling pressured. Instead, I think Richardson will throw the ball into traffic just to get rid of the ball. Like I know, Matt, you said he stands in under pressure. I think he does that, but I think he also will just fire the ball into coverage under pressure. Because of this, Florida was overly reliant on play action and bootlegs to buy time for Richardson. In reality, Anthony Richardson is an uber athletic project quarterback who will probably be taken a little too early by an NFL team hoping to capture that Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts magic. In our break from reality, though, Richardson is a unicorn, a quarterback with the potential to dominate with his legs as well as be serviceable through the air, and that is a dynamite combination for fantasy football.
And then another thing to consider is that Anthony Richardson may be a player that, similar to what we're going to be talking about soon with these tight ends, you may need to put him in the slow cooker. It may be a case where he flashes fast and you have to decide, am I staying in for the long run or am I going to go ahead and get what I can for him? But in either way, we know that the repetitions at anything that you do matters, and especially so at the quarterback position. With as few starts as he's had, gameplay will do him good to be able to get more repetition. So I'm curious to see how that plays out here in the coming years. That said, a guy who has no issues with number of games played and plenty of experience behind center. We head down to Knoxville, Tennessee, and if you've been with us throughout this journey this year in 2023, there's only one of these quarterbacks who we've talked about two of their wide receiving weapons, and that would be now with Hendon Hooker. Again, finishes 5th in the Heisman voting, tears his ACL near the end of the season, goes pass for pass with Bryce Young and is able to knock off Alabama. Hendon Hooker was riding Aladdin's magic carpet all season long, right up until the tail end. 329 attempts this past year, over 3,000 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 31 touchdowns the season before, and in the last 2 seasons, only 5 interceptions. Hendon Hooker was out there airing it out left and right for Josh Heupel's offense. And again, y'all know how I feel about that ugly shade of orange. But the man's a baller, and I can't hate it. It's a fact of life. Hendon Hooker's really talented. Now, coming back from the ACL, is he as complete as people hope that he is? Zach, tell us more Hendon Hooker news.
Hooker isn't the world's oldest professional quarterback, but he's up there. Whedon and Winkie were 28 and 29, respectively. Hooker is 25, and that isn't even the biggest hurdle he's facing. The Tennessee super senior tore his ACL in November. In spite of the adversity, Hendon Hooker is an interesting quarterback prospect in the 2023 class. I think Hooker is an above-average runner who can succeed on designed runs as well as using his legs to escape trouble. He's very accurate on throws underneath the defense, getting the ball out quickly while allowing his receivers to add extra yardage with on-target throws. Hooker can also get the ball down the field. He's got great feel and touch on his deep throws, often hitting receivers in stride, allowing them to carry the ball to the paint. The biggest piece, I think, of being a successful quarterback is decision-making. And I think Hendon Hooker absolutely has that. He is consistently doing the right thing, whether it's checking the ball down, tucking and running for a first down, or throwing the ball away when he's under too much duress.
Let's keep it going, Foreman. Let's talk a little bit about the things you enjoy watching Hendon Hooker play this crazy game of football.
Guys, I'm really disappointed in you. This 2023, this is the time we shouldn't shame people with Hendon sex worker. Okay, we're not using derogatory terms to describe people anymore. Okay, Zach's oldest profession joke. Come on now. I thought we were better than this. I thought we were above this. Anyways,
Be better, Zach. Be better.
granted, it was hilarious. Don't get me wrong, but anyways, I again another guy that I put on here, and I took him with the 207 pick in a rookie SuperFlex mock last night with the FF Dynasty guys, and I think it's someone we're seeing who's getting a little bit late buzz here. There was mock drafts I saw yesterday who had the Vikings taking Hendon Hooker with the first round draft pick. I mean, so again, things I'm seeing that are, again, he's an accurate quarterback most of the time. He's hitting these guys in stride. He's able to work the ball at all three levels. And then I think he provides a bit more of a rushing ability than you would initially thought from him. And again, it's just I think he could have won the Heisman this year if he wouldn't have gotten injured. I mean, they were going to lose like into South Carolina regardless, but and they kind of knocked him out at that point. But it's just like, what was Justin Fuente doing with him? That, I mean, Heupel's a genius. It seems like we're seeing. So I'm interested to see what the NFL thinks. What the NFL thinks of Mr. Hendon. To be able to figure out what they're going to do with him. Selfishly, I mean, I'd love to see him somehow the Rams get him with a day 2 pick and have him pair him up with McVay in the long term. That would be so sweet in my mind.
Hendon Hooker, a player that, again, as previously mentioned, 5th in the Heisman voting. Definitely, like you said, Foreman could have won the award. So many good things about that offense and how they were able to put up points left, right, and center. But obviously, we've got some things that we don't particularly enjoy. Otherwise, we would have mentioned him probably much sooner in this contest here this evening. So let's talk about it, Foreman. What you got?
Yeah, again, we just go back to what was going on in Virginia Tech. What was happening there? Why did you need this some sort of offensive guru? Again, obviously we're going to perform better with these offensive gurus, but I don't think he was a draftable quarterback when he was playing in Blacksburg, and then he goes to Virginia Tech, and now we're talking him as a top 60 draft pick. So again, my biggest concern with Hooker is that he just misses too many throws. There's those throws where he makes them 8 times out of 10, and then there's just 20% of throws where I don't know what's happening. It just seems like he just misfires. Jesus. So that's I'm not even sure what's causing these misfires. It just seems like he's just has like an oopsie daisy there. I just don't get it. But and again, you have the injury concern there as well too. But I think without the injury concern, it's ACL, so the ACL isn't what it used to be. But I think that's obviously holding people back as well too a bit. But I think without the ACL, I think he'd be much closer to these top 4 guys.
There it is, Zach. Let's close out on Hendon. Choose your last name wisely.
There's a good chance that Hooker doesn't sneak into the first round in April, although obviously there's some late buzz, but there are some flaws. He will miss long on some of his deep throws, although giving his receiver the only chance to catch it isn't the worst habit. Hooker also has a tendency to pull the string on shorter throws over the middle, taking something off and mistiming with his receivers. He's almost throwing them a change up there. Even though he's a decent runner, Hooker will hold the ball too long instead of utilizing his scrambling ability. And no one has eyes in the back of their head, but Hooker loses track of backside pressure a lot more than you'd like to see. Hendon Hooker's fantasy viability is going to be inexorably tied to his draft capital and a team's willingness to take a chance on an older, injured prospect. However, I think he has all the tools to be successful for both the NFL and for fantasy if he's given a shot. I was really surprised by how much I liked Hendon Hooker's tape.
Zach, coming back to you real fast. of this group, which guys are see it, throw it, which guys are anticipatory passers?
Man, that's a good question. I think that it's kind of a combination. Hendon Hooker had so many like see it, throw it plays that it was really hard to get a read on him. Like Tennessee did so much where they're stacking up and putting Hyatt in motion and doing that sort of thing that he's getting some easy throws. I really think that this is a really nice class of quarterbacks where you get kind of a mix of both. There are guys who can kind of cross platform.
Very well. That's the quarterback talk. We're not going to even get to the rankings until the end. So stay tuned. As we go through these tight ends, since we're finally ready for it, warmed up and ready to get this taken care of, both of the guys will give you their thoughts in terms of the positives and the drawbacks, the areas of opportunity, all in one fell swoop. We've got 5 players that we want to be able to get through, and we want to make sure that we get it done in this episode as well and be able to close out this the way that we want to, as only the Hootenanny can. With that said, Foreman, I'm coming over to you first, and we're going to talk Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. 6 feet, 4 inches, 249 pounds. Big fella. And certainly not the biggest fella that we're going to talk about in the next several minutes here. Michael Mayer has been a player who many people have been excited about for a very long time. And now that we're here ready to draft him, all of a sudden everyone has nitpicked for many a moon now. When we look at Michael Mayer over the last couple of seasons, we saw the transition out of the I about called him Josh Kelly. I about called him Coach Kelly. I can't
Brian
even think of
Kelly.
his first name.
Brian.
Thank you. Brian Kelly. Transitioned out of Brian Kelly's offense and something that was functional back in 2021 to something this past season that was really strange to see. And they didn't really have a quarterback worth a dime at many of the points throughout the year. And he had pretty similar numbers in both seasons. Both seasons had 800 yards, 4 catches difference between 2021 and 2022, and 7 to 9 touchdowns. So let's talk Michael Mayer, the ups, the downs, all the things that you've got for us, Foreman.
Yeah, so Mayer has a great positional versatility. He's a pretty effective blocker. I would say he's a decent route runner. Obviously, we're not going to have the in most cases a lot of these guys be Jerry Jeudy in terms of route running ability. He works well in traffic, which is something you want to see with these tight ends. He transitions quickly to a ball carry after securing the catch. He's got pretty good hands there. He's going to be a great security blanket down. He's going to be a great security blanket for his next quarterback. He's instantly going to be a red zone weapon with his size and route running ability, and he can do some damage after the catch as well too. In terms of negatives, he's got weird balance. Like I felt like he was just like falling over a lot. Like I don't know what it was, but it just felt like his equilibrium was off. Like maybe he's dealing with some vertigo. I don't know. But I also found him to be a bit stiff as well too. As a route runner, he's definitely a bit stiff there. And he doesn't really do as much as I would have liked him to do in stretching in working the middle in terms of the downfield passing game. I think there's another player who does it a bit better than he does in that aspect.
Ooh, you love to see it. Zach, what do you have on Mayer?
Michael Mayer was already a monster when he came to Notre Dame as the number 2 ranked tight end in the nation. He's been slowly stalking toward the NFL since then. While he's not exactly a slasher, Michael Mayer can be a nightmare for defenses. I think Mayer's the safest tight end prospect in this class. He's an excellent blocker, especially on the outside where he can seal off an edge for his running back. As a receiver, Mayer is incredibly dependable, presenting his quarterback with an inviting target, even in traffic. Against zone, Mayer attacks underneath really well with hitches, curls, and outs to find holes between defenders to create those throwing lanes. When matched up against man coverage, Mayer's go-to is a really quick out, and he does a good job holding back his cut until the last second at the stem of his route, and he leaves defenders struggling to react to that. While teams don't necessarily expect their tight ends to burn up the field, Mayer's lack of speed is very noticeable. He's often unable to run away from defenders, both in route and post catch. I think on longer routes versus zone coverage, Mayer tends to drift too far, cutting down those throwing angles for his quarterback and leaving him effectively covered. And although he's a very good blocker, Mayer will sometimes get vertically too quickly and come off the block earlier than he should. It's a scary proposition counting on production from young tight ends in fantasy, but Michael Mayer should be as close to a lock as you can get at the position. While he probably doesn't have the chance to reach the overall height of a few other members of the 2023 class, Mayer does look like a top 12 tight end for years to come.
And for those scoring at home, earlier in the episode, we talked through the whole relative athletic score. Yes, all of these guys that we're going to be talking through all make the cut above that 6 line. So Michael Mayer, I believe, was at, I think, according to the website I'm showing right now, 8.42. So he must have got a bump perhaps from the numbers at his pro day. Moving on. Dalton Kincaid, the Utah Ute, who many believe might be the top guy in this class. A lot of folks really enjoy what he's been able to put on film. And when we look at what he did specifically in this past season, the 6 feet, 3-inch, 246-pound tight end out in the Pac-12, 70 catches, 890 yards, and 8 touchdowns. 8 touchdowns in the prior season as well. The guy can get it in the paint. He's able to make plays all over the place. Zach, we'll start with you. Let's talk all things Dalton Kincaid.
Evaluating the tight end position isn't always easy because very few get enough volume in college to give a complete picture of their capabilities. Dalton Kincaid is an exception. Kincaid led Utah's offense in targets, receptions, receiving yards, total yards, and touchdowns. He was on full display this past year. Kincaid's biggest strength is his versatility. He can be used in line from the H-back position and as a blocker, but also Kincaid is a weapon as a receiver in both short throws and throws down the field. Kincaid has very good hands, catching the ball away from his body, even in traffic. And once he has secured the catch, he transitions to a runner very quickly and adds yards after the catch with that quickness and some contact balance. But as tremendous as Kincaid is in the short and long passing games, he struggles with separating in the intermediate areas over the middle of the field. It becomes especially obvious against zone coverage when he fails to read the cushion given to him and just sits with a defender. Drives me absolutely batty. When Kincaid is asked to sustain a block, he has a tendency to come off too early, allowing his defender to get a second chance at the tackle. This is even an issue when Kincaid gets into the second level blocking for a runner, which is a weird thing because you would think all he would have to do is keep moving, but he doesn't stay on that block. The 2023 class is riddled with talented athletic tight ends. It's yet another feature that I think is pushing the overall talent pool up to a high level in this class. Dalton Kincaid has the versatility and offensive skill to be a fantasy producer in the coming years. I think he's a really good tight end.
Ooh-wee. I'd like to hear that. Foreman, are you also on the Kincaid train?
Yes, that I would consider myself on the Kincaid train as well, too. I'm going to mirror a lot of the same things Zach said as per usual. Great hands, solid body control. Unlike Mayer, he can work the seams. Like Zach mentioned, he can work the downfield passing game. And he was, again, it's weird to seeing a tight end being the number one target. Although we're going to say that next year with another tight end guy who is a generational tight end, but we'll wait till next year to talk about him. He functioned, like Zach mentioned, he functions well as a lead blocker from that H-back or in-line position as a pooler. But he can struggle to hold blocks, and I think that's something that's going to hold him back potentially from seeing getting on the field immediately as a team's sole tight end, barring that they're not just using him as a move tight end. And I do think he's physical in and after the catch as well too, and he does provide the good route running ability. My biggest concern with Kincaid is again his overall blocking, and he does fail to separate there, like Zach mentioned, with zone as well too. But struggling, his blocking ability is just not quite there. But I think that's something that can be potentially coached up, especially because I can see pieces of it there. So I think there's definitely a willingness there. I think it's a technique thing. And if he can get that technique down, I think the sky could be the limit here with Kincaid.
I'm going to throw this in as a quick gem. And as much as Dalton Kincaid showed on film and as talented as he is, I sent this tweet about 2 years ago, March 2021. I just want to throw this out there. Since 2012, here's the group of tight ends listed below 6'4" with a top 5 position finish. This is PPR weeks 1 through 16. Again, listed below 6'4", the top 5 position finish. Vernon Davis in 2013. Delaney Walker did it 3 consecutive years, 2015 through 2017. Jordan Reed, 2015. Shout out to pour one out for Jordan Reed. And Evan Ingram, who's resurfaced. But that was in 2017. Again, Dalton Kincaid registered at 6'3". Do with the information what you will, but know that the man can ball, because this originally was a Brevin Jordan tweet back then. And I'm just throwing that out there just for the sake of the measurements, because I find it interesting. Typically at the tight end position, it's the big guys who typically finish at the top of the heap. And again, that tweet is now 2 years old, but I think it still breathes life today. Speaking of generational talents that we'll be talking about next year, we're heading down to Athens, Georgia, to talk about his Robin to Brock Bowers' Batman, when really it doesn't look anything like that. Darnell Washington actually looks like Batman to Brock Bowers' Robin when you put those guys side by side. Darnell Washington, 6'6", 264 pounds, 3-cone to die for. This guy, what he doesn't make up for in production, he makes up for in sheer size and what could be. When people dream about NFL tight end stardom, I think they can look at Darnell Washington and be like, you know what? I think we can do something with that. Matt Foreman, first words are over to you regarding the large, not so productive Darnell Washington.
Yeah, I think is Darnell Washington, Roshan Johnson, and Brock Bowers, Bijan Robinson? Time will only tell for us. So we don't know about either of those two guys, but I think we've got a good guess about the other two, about how they're going to do. But Washington's going to be an immediate starter in the sense that he's just going to block the hell out of whoever is going to be in front of him. It's just, I mean, everyone saw that sled drill with the sled drill, but he just made it look like a rag doll. He's going to see immediate work in goal line in those key areas in goal line, and he's 6 foot. What is he? 6'7", 6'6", 6'7".
I think at the combine he measured in about 6'6" and a half. So we'll say 6'6".
Okay, so at 6'6", I mean he's a big boy. So Mike, all those things blocking great. I think he does have some decent hands as well too. That he's able to have those nice soft hands. I just would have liked to have seen more work from him, but it's hard with that Georgia offense there. My concern with Washington is something that Zach and I talked about before the show started. Is this is not a comparison, but is Washington too good of a blocker for him to be able to not to be able to catch passes? In the sense that, is he Mo Alley Cox? He's like what Mo Alley Cox is as a 6-year player, Washington is as a rookie, where I think there's a little bit more finesse to his passing game, but is he ever going to be able to be that true passing asset that you want to be? I think he can be. I'm just not sure what his overall upside is in terms of that, other than scoring touchdowns. I think we're hoping that he's going to be Antonio Gates, and that I think that is his ceiling, but are we ever going to get to that is the real question.
Fair questions. Zach, over to you. The excitement and the deficiencies. Darnell Washington.
Yeah, seeing Darnell Washington for the first time feels a little bit like being Dr. Ellie Sattler sitting in that Jeep waiting for the Brachiosaurus reveal. You know, Alan, this species of tight end should have been extinct in the Cretaceous period. I think maybe Georgia should have John Williams do the score for their games. Just food for thought. If there was any question about Washington's athleticism, those were allayed at the combine. The 6'6", 265-pound tight end ran a 4.64 in the 40. He broad jumped 10.2. And the coup de grace, he posted the third best short shuttle at the combine for any position. He is fast and athletic enough to be used downfield on seam routes. And if the ball gets anywhere near him, he is making the catch. Washington has the longest wingspan of any tight end ever measured at the combine, and his hands seem to have their own gravity. As a blocker, Washington adds another lineman at times, enveloping defenders as he sets the edge. Unfortunately, and Matt, you absolutely hit this on the head, Washington's blocking may be too good. It would be well within reason that a team, much the same as what Georgia did over the last few years, decides that the advantage Washington gives them as an extra blocker outshines his contributions as a receiver. I think he also struggles a little bit with a lack of quickness, both at the initial release and within his routes. And that leads to periods of time when Washington loses the battle for separation on short and intermediate routes. And so there you're getting those big long plays, the chunk plays that are eye-popping, but you're not necessarily getting the plays in between that are that foundation for you to build fantasy points on. There's always a chance that the dinosaurs escape when you're doing a Jurassic Park, and carnage and sorrow ensues. But there's also a scenario where everything goes right and the fleeting glimpses of that Gronk-like figure screaming up the scene for massive chunk yards happen. And that's what you have with Darnell Washington.
Man, it's so exciting to think about what could be. For those that enjoy dreaming a little bit, you could foresee a world where Darnell Washington becomes one of the guys in the National Football League and in our fantasy game. I think it could be a lot of fun. For those scoring at home, that is a 9.88 relative athletic score. Only one person with a better one, and we'll get to him in just a moment. But before that, well, let's go Luke Musgrave, Oregon State standout tight end. Luke Musgrave had a really interesting box score, if you will, or career as you look at it. Games played in 4 seasons, 2 as a freshman, 6 as a sophomore, 10 as a junior, and then here we are in 2022 where he only played in 2 games. Only 47 catches total over his career, 6'6", 253 pounds weighing in at the combine. So we are officially continuing in the land of giants. Zach, Luke Musgrave, this seems like a really strange spot to put Musgrave, who's amongst players who are incredibly talented, but also these players with a lot of promise. Where does Musgrave land with his game?
Yeah, 47 catches for 693 yards and a couple of touchdowns. That's a really great season for a tight end. Sadly, that's the sum of Luke Musgrave's entire career at Oregon State. After getting injured in the second game of the season in 2022, Musgrave sat out until the Senior Bowl, but he impressed the crowds there during his week in Mobile. There is certainly such a thing as play speed, and Luke Musgrave has it. Because of his speed-size combination, Musgrave can create mismatches, whether he's lined up, in line, or split wide. He excels at stretching the field, getting behind slower defenders for big chunks of yards. When you saw that, he had 11 catches for 169 yards in the 2 games in 2022. When he's working against zone coverage, Musgrave is able to find those open pockets along the sideline, and he plays the boundaries very well. Contrary to reports out of the Senior Bowl, though, I think Musgrave's blocking is suspect at best. It was apparent that Oregon State's game plan was to run away from whichever side Musgrave was lined up on. And when he is asked to run block, he approaches it as if he's pass blocking. So he's giving up ground instead of firing off and pushing the defender. But I think his biggest flaw as an offensive piece is his seemingly unquenchable thirst to make contact with the covering defender during his route. Musgrave initiates physicality and then is unable to free himself, it negates him as an effective receiver. The NFL will probably be excited about Musgrave's physical tools, that 6'6" frame and the 4.61 40-yard dash. I think fantasy football is going to be excited about his draft capital and that 9.95 out of a possible 10 relative athletic score. But I think ultimately Musgrave falls short of those lofty expectations for fantasy. He feels more like a field stretcher and less of a tight end, kind of a man without a position.
Horse with no name, a man without a position. Foreman, what do you say about Luke Musgrave?
Yeah, mimicking things Zach says there, in agreement with him there. I think there's a lot to like with Musgrave. Obviously, we have the athleticism there. With his obviously lost my whole train of thought there with his athleticism, but he struggles more of a blocker than Kincaid does. I think that's really going to hold him back is going to be his blocking. Again, we want to see those hyper athletic guys. But at the end of the day, if he's a tight end, if he's tight end 14, why do I care about him? Like if those guys tight end 8 to tight end 16 or tight end, even it seems like tight end 6 to like tight end 18, they're all within like a half to 1 point per game difference. And at that point, why do I care? I'm just going to grab the guy who's cheaper. So I think that's the thing with me with Musgrave is I don't think he's ever going to be that elite player in terms of the elite player where he's going to be a difference maker where you could see it with those first 3 guys, maybe to a lesser extent with Mayer and the fact that he's a little bit safer of a prospect. He doesn't have that upside. But Musgrave just seems like he's just kind of just a guy where I don't know if he has that. He can pair that athleticism with him being a top level tight end.
Very well. Very well. Here we are, fellas. Last player on the night. And stop me if you've heard this before in Hootenanny history. Penn State transfer. Zack Kuntz being the only player of this tight end position to score a perfect 10 for his relative athletic score. Shout out again to Math Bomb. A 10. I give it a 10. Freaking 10. Love that movie. Zack Kuntz, again, you talk about eye-popping athleticism, 40-inch vertical, 10-foot broad jump. Obviously, he's 6 feet 7 inches, 255 pounds, 4.55 40. The shuttle was 4.12. This guy can flat out move. He's a specimen, and it was really cool to be able to see him perform in that way. I would have loved to have seen a lot more production, but what he did flash in one season at Old Dominion when they were in Conference USA, 73 catches, 692 yards, only 5 touchdowns. And aside from the 13 games that he played in the 2021 season, the other 4 years from 2018 through 2020 and 2022, he only appeared in 8 total games over those 4 years. While being an awesome athlete is fun, what is going on? Foreman, we've got to go to you first. Zack Kuntz, what the heck happened in 3 years at Penn State?
Shout out Zack Kuntz and his 3 career catches at Penn State. It didn't help him that he had he was there behind Gesicki and then he was behind Freiermuth. So I can't really say I blame him too much for transferring. Shout out Camp Hill High School. But I mean, again, just talk about Musgrave. This guy is incredibly athletic. And I was on the ODU website, and this boy's he's a lot more muscular than I remember him being at Penn State. I can tell you that much because that guy was a beanpole at Penn State. So he's been hitting the weight room there with shout out Ricky Ronnie. Kuntz's tape, first of all, Kuntz's tape was hard to find, by the way. Just finding anything more than highlights was a bit of a task. But again, Kuntz, excellent size and speed. He's going to be a red zone threat right from the beginning. My biggest concern with Kuntz is how does he translate from his 3 catches in the Big Ten to whatever ODU is playing in anymore. Are they still in Conference USA, or I mean, what are they even in now? They're an independent, or
I think they
Sun
finished in the
Belt?
Sun Belt this past
Oh,
year.
the
Yeah.
Fun Belt! Shout out the Fun Belt. And as we mentioned with Musgrave as well too, I think Musgrave is a better blocker than Kuntz is. I think that a lamppost is a better blocker than Kuntz is at this point, because at least it stays still.
Oh man, that is harsh. Zach, are you as abrasive when it comes to Zack Kuntz?
Lao Tzu, a 6th century Chinese philosopher and NFL advanced scout, once said about Zack Kuntz, the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. Kuntz dropped a match at the combine and the entire football world melted from the heat. I think Kuntz is very quick at the release point and a very smooth route runner. He's able to use his speed and 6'7" frame to create mismatches downfield, but he also has a few double moves in his bag of tricks, which are really unfair to unsuspecting linebackers in coverage. Kuntz is also very good at leveraging space between levels of zone, especially when he can use the sideline to help shield that catch. That's the old cover 2, those 17 yard holes on the sideline. He finds those, does a really good job. But I think versatility, or more specifically lack of versatility, is going to be a huge hurdle for Kuntz. He is well below average when he's put in line. So Old Dominion used him primarily at H-back or split out wide. And although he is an eager blocker, he's not a very good one. And unless Kuntz is being used to wham block, there's a good chance that he's getting lit up by a defensive lineman or a backer. He's such a liability blocking that he was often removed on 3rd down and short yardage. And although Kuntz is a nightmare to try to cover, he doesn't go hard every time he has a route. So it becomes really easy to tell when he is going to be a non-factor. Although Kuntz blazed through the combine, I think it's fairly easy to see a path where he burns all his fuel before becoming a viable fantasy option. His athletic upside makes him worth a flyer pick in the 3rd or 4th round of your rookie drafts, but I don't think Kuntz is someone that I'm actively going to target.
There you have it. Quarterbacks and tight ends of all things Hootenanny. It's fun to be able to get to this point because we know that the catch-all's on the horizon, but the evening is not done just yet because we still have rankings for both of these positions. While it's fresh on our minds, let's stay with the tight ends, and I'm curious. Foreman, you get to go first. Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, who's your top guy, and how do you have him ranked?
So I do have Kincaid at 1. I have mine as Kincaid, Mayer, Washington. I kind of have those guys in a tier of their own with the tight ends because, again, it's if you told me Washington, if you could have given me double Washington's production, I think I'd have him up a little higher. It's just I got to squint a little bit more to see it there. But I think those guys are in a tier of their own. I'd probably have Musgraves in a tier. I'd probably have another couple of guys in there with Musgrave as well too. And then Kuntz at the bottom for me. Again, like things Zach mentioned, it's just he might be a good flyer pick, but not someone I'm actively trying to target in tight end premium leagues.
All right, over to you, Zach. How do you have these guys sorted?
Darnell Washington grades out highest for me. He is my tight end 1. And I'm old enough, so it was Rob Deere taking those home run cuts, the strikeout or home run. So that's where I'm at with tight end. I want to go big. Number 2 is Michael Mayer. I think he's almost a can't miss. He's just that good. Dalton Kincaid is 3 and right in that same tier. All 3 of those players are very similar, but I think Darnell Washington has the biggest upside. Then Musgrave, then Kuntz, and I think those 2 are clearly below the first 3.
Let's just have all the fun in the world because I have them ranked differently, except for the bottom 2 like you guys. But same bottom 2. I've got Mayer at number 1. I've got Washington at 2. And I've got Dalton Kincaid at 3. And the separation, I believe, was 2 points between the 3 of the guys.
Yeah.
and I feel like I still dream a little bit, even though that is my film grades for them. I'm really excited for what could be with Washington. I don't know. It's fun to dream, but also film grade wise, yeah, he was my number 2 behind Mayer, so I'm excited. Let's head back to quarterback town, and actually before we do that, just want to throw this out there to folks. We haven't talked Luke Schoonmaker yet out of Michigan. We haven't talked Tucker Kraft yet out of South Dakota State. We haven't talked Sam Laporta out of Iowa. Shout out to my buddy Spencer, who I know is going to be checking for that one. There's some tight ends still in this class to be able to talk about awesome athletes, lots of good production. Curious what the catch-all show, if we're going to end up having to have a part 2 to the catch-all. We'll see. I don't know, but there's a lot of guys still that are worth mentioning and talking through at least a little bit. Back to the quarterbacks, the grand finale, if you will. I know folks are excited to be able to see how we have these guys sorted out. We've talked Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker. Here we are, Zach, the precipice of greatness. We're not keeping people waiting any longer. What do you have these guys ranked out as?
So film grades, Bryce Young, number 1. CJ Stroud, number 2. The sleeper of sleepers, Hendon Hooker at 3. Like I like Hooker more than I thought I was going to. Will Levis at 4, and Anthony Richardson at 5. But the caveat with all of this is film grades and the way you should draft them for fantasy football are totally different. The way you should draft them for fantasy football is Anthony Richardson at 1, and then Young, Stroud, probably Levis, and then Hooker. Like that. So it's this weird dichotomy, this weird place where fantasy and reality are not the same thing. And it's the same way I attacked things with Lamar Jackson when Baker Mayfield was a better thrower, a better quarterback. But Lamar Jackson was head and shoulders the fantasy player that you wanted. The same thing with Jalen Hurts. Even Trey Lance a couple of years ago, it's that same process, the legs, the production through the run game that makes Anthony Richardson so valuable as a quarterback for fantasy.
Yeah, that's exciting. Foreman, take us through your quarterbacks.
So I have Stroud and Young in the top 2 there. I think they're almost interchangeable for me. I'm going to give the slight bit to Stroud there on size. I hate being the size this tier, but 5'10", it doesn't let me sleep well at night. So give me those couple extra inches and let me sleep a little better. Yikes, I can't believe I just said that. Anyways, and then I have Richardson at 3, Hooker at 4, and then Levis at 5. I don't see myself owning a ton of Levis shares at this point, just because in the area we're taking him, I think I'd rather have some of these other in tight end premium. In one quarterback, I will not own any shares of him. But in these SuperFlex, there are 2 quarterback leagues. He's going in a range where I'd rather take the gamble on some of these skill position players.
If you've made it this far, it's going to be worth it to stick around for the outtakes, because that is going to be fun to edit.
Oh, man. Too much fun here at the Hootenanny. I'll close this up here. Listen, Bryce Young's my absolute favorite watch from quarterbacks that we've done, period. He's my favorite. He's my favorite watch. He's got my best film grade. Bryce Young's that guy for me. I've got CJ Stroud at 2. Film grades. I've got Hendon at 3. I've got Levis at 4. I've got Richardson at 5. And I'm of similar mindset with Zach that I'm probably pushing Richardson up if I'm looking at drafting these guys for what could be. And again, we talked about taking those home run hacks. I think here's the only place that I differ. I am willing, if I am in the 101, and this is not a do as I do. This is do as Matt and Zach have said and what they're doing. If I have the 101 and I need a quarterback, I would not sleep well if I pass on Bryce Young. I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. I know Bijan's amazing. I know we love him. And again, this is me, the dynasty player, talking here. Bryce Young is someone that I really want on my teams, like straight up. I think he's that guy. So, yeah, that's quarterbacks, that's tight ends, that's the rookie hootenanny as far as the first run through. The dress rehearsal, if you will, before we start getting into the catch-all and having a little bit more fun in the coming weeks. We've seen the tweets. We've seen your Evan Holes. We've seen your Chase Browns. We've seen your AT, a.k.a. at Perry's. We've seen the Puka Nakuas. We've seen the tweets. And we thank you so much for interacting with us and being able to throw out some of those names for us to check out. Curious to see what shakes out in terms of how we want to do this over the next week or two. Not pushing anything, but I'm curious to see who we end up talking through. It'll be a surprise because we haven't even decided yet, but I'm sure that that's something that we'll navigate this evening in the coming days. Fellas, quarterbacks and tight ends in the books. Final words before we get out of here. Foreman, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I think we've all talked about it before. It's just with these quarterbacks, the film grades don't probably match with what exactly we're thinking in terms of where we're taking these players. So, and again, I think these are all subject to changes. Every one of these things is subject to change as we get landing spots here as well too. So, we're taking these things for what we're seeing on film, but they are not definitive rankings.
Yes, and I feel like that's so key to continue to hammer home. We talk so much about these being film grades, and we talk so much about what we enjoy about this. Understanding that the draft still plays a major part, infrastructures and teams in terms of where these quarterbacks land specifically will play a major part in a lot of what's going on. So please understand, still more to the process. But man, how fun is this? Zach, what do you got?
We are through 34 players, and there are still guys that we are excited about, that we want to talk about, that other people want us to talk about and want to hear about. How good is this class? How good is this class for fantasy football? We've got 4 or 5 quarterbacks that we like. We've got 2 or 3 top tier wide receivers, and then some other guys that we are interested in. We've got a stud running back, and then an entire glut of guys who are going to be fantasy relevant. This class is so good, so much fun. I really appreciate everybody who has rolled with us through the first 4 Hootenanny shows. I think we've got to do at least 2 catch-all. I think there's got to be a pass catcher and a running back show. I don't think there's any way we can get around it. And I'm kind of excited about it. I enjoy this. This is my favorite time of year. I hope you guys enjoy it too. We appreciate you rolling with us. It has been Matt Foreman, who is at Fat Mormon on Twitter. It has been JMIc at JMIc. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. We're rolling at you again next week and probably the week after. 2 catch-all shows, the Dynasty Dummy Rookie Hootenanny. We appreciate you listening. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Peace. And then there's that button. Got to find